the legendary John Cox, the voice of the Golden Southern Eagles. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. The legendary voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, John Cox, Voices of the Sun Belt, is on Locked On Sun Belt. Let's try that again. 3, 2, 1. A very special guest for this feature of 3, 2, 1. A very special guest for Voices of the Sun Belt, the legendary voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. He's John Cox on Locked On Sun Belt.
You are Locked On Sun Belt, your daily podcast on the Sun Belt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by the Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC. HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, really looking forward to this conversation with John Cox. We talk about him being in his 47th season, and he will hit 500 college football games very early on. We'll talk about his career, how much longer he's going to do it. And, of course, we talk about the Southern Miss Golden Eagles with Will Hall. Is he a good fit? It's time for him to win. What about the way the kids are now with the NIL and the portal? And we just get into all of it and his expectations for 2024. It is the legendary voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. He is John Cox on Locked On Sun Belt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. We continue with our Voices of the Sun Belt, and thrilled and honored to have John Cox on, the voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, heading into his 47th year of broadcasting for Southern Miss. He will get his 500th football broadcast under his belt following, or it'll be the second game of the season for Southern Miss. John, do you remember your first game? And thanks so much for hopping on.
I do. It was subbing for Bill Goodrich. Bill Goodrich and Vic Purvis were the radio crew back in 1978, and they decided that we were going to do a couple of televised games, one from Louisville and one from Bowling Green. And so at the time, I was kind of spotting and doing some other stuff for Bill and doing women's basketball and things like that. So all of a sudden, I got switched over, and all of a sudden, I'm doing the radio broadcast that particular afternoon from old Cardinal Stadium there in Louisville, Kentucky, Southern Miss and the Louisville Cardinals. So that was the first one, long time ago, back in 1978.
So are you telling me there was a little bit of a Wally Pipp, Lou Gehrig situation going on here?
No, nothing quite like that. Bill was just, they decided they were going to, Southern Miss was getting a pretty good season going on there in 78 in football. They decided to televise a couple of games back locally. So they took our radio crew of Bill Goodrich and Vic Purvis, put them on the TV, and me and Dick Strimmel did the radio that particular, those couple of games back in 1978.
Were you nervous?
Nah, I don't even remember, but I don't think so. There was too much going on to be too nervous about it. You just sat down and did it. Back then, you didn't think about being nervous.
See, I disagree. I had my first broadcast as a baseball broadcaster. I did it for over a decade, and the first one I had it timed out perfectly. 15-minute pregame show, good to go, except opening day doesn't go perfectly as, So all of a sudden, we got another 15, 20 minutes, and I'm cottonmouth, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I was nervous. I don't mind telling you for my first broadcast. So you've done 500 football games. You have seen college football change immensely. I'm still not happy about the 2-minute warning and the clock stopping or not stopping at first downs, but we are obviously in a different age of football now. Have you seen that been affected on the field just yet with the NIL and the transfer portal?
Not really. I think the hardest thing is that, it used to be when you got ready for a season, it was a roster that was full of, at least from the broadcasting standpoint, a roster that was full of guys that you had known for 3 or 4 years because they had been a part of your team. And now all of a sudden, as you sit down to prepare for another season, there aren't as many of those guys as it used to be. And there's new names and new players, and they've come from different places. And so that's the big thing. I don't know that I mean, that's just something you got to find a way to overcome, but it doesn't bother me too much. It's just different than it used to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've heard, ULM has 73, Coastal Carolina had like 66, Marshall, somebody else had 58. How many new players did Southern Miss go and get in the portal? Do you know?
I really don't. I don't know the number. There's a bunch of them, though. When you sit there at practice every morning like I do, and we practice in the morning, you look at those guys and, the guys that have been here for a while, immediately by their number or the way they look, but a lot of new faces. So it probably takes a little more preparation time, a little more study time to learn the new players and their backgrounds. But I don't know how many we have, but there's a bunch wherever you go anymore. And, that goes for the other team too. All these teams that you play in the Sun Belt, who you finally sort of learn their rosters and sort of know who's who and what's what, including the coaches. And all of a sudden that's changed. So it's just a different world, but, just one more hurdle to have to overcome sometimes.
Well, eventually we'll hear from Mike Hammett from ULM. He's using the new, football game on PS5, NCAA Football 25, to figure out the rosters. Is that something along the lines of what you're doing?
No, that's a little too fancy for me. I'm one of those guys who sits down with a sheet of paper and a roster and a spotting chart and just kind of memorizes them that way. So yeah, Mike's way ahead. Way ahead of what I am as far as learning stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll see how well it works out for Mike. He says he's trying to do it with the road teams as well. So you just never know. We're talking with John Cox, the voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Let's talk about this version of the Golden Eagles. And we're getting a lot of honesty from coaches around the league. Surprising to hear it from Mike Desimo. He says it's time to win. Will Hall says it's time to win. It's tough to do that because it just hasn't worked out quarterback-wise. I know they got Tate Rodemaker from, Mississippi kid who went to Florida State and is now with the Golden Eagles. But he had his quarterback. It hasn't worked out. That guy is now at La Tech. And it's tough to build anything consistently without being consistent at quarterback. And, when you're using a guy like Frank Gore Jr. as your superback who was effective in that role, it's tough to win consistently. Although they did go to a bowl game a couple of years ago in South Alabama or in Mobile, ended up winning the ball game.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know. I'm a little old school, but I think it's neat that I think from the player standpoint more than anything else, it's pretty nice that those guys have got a chance to kind of better themselves instead of being locked in. But I think Will and them have done a good job of trying to find Southern Miss type players. I think there's a certain type of guy that you like to wear that black and gold and sort of as a carry the just kind of those blue collar workers, those kinds of guys. And so I think he's done a good job of finding a lot of guys like that. I think it's going to be an interesting situation there at quarterback with Tate Rodemaker and then Ethan Crawford, the young sophomore out of Tuscaloosa who played quite a bit last year for the Golden Eagles. And so I think if you find the right guys, obviously it's a good way to kind of build your program. But I think Will's done a good job. They've been able to bring in a lot of good young players on both sides of the balls and kind of fill some slots, maybe some holes that they needed. So anxious to see how it gets started here in about a week or so.
Hey, Locked On Sunbelt fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step in the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine being the head coach of the Texas State Bobcats? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and has 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Sunbelt fans. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. Ultimate-cfb.com or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to our conversation with a voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Time for Will Hall to win. Is he the right fit for this Southern Miss Golden Eagles football team? Talking to John Cox, voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. It is voices of the Sunbelt. Let's talk a little Will Hall. So I sort of got this up close and personal because, Southern Miss in 16, I guess, takes down the Cajuns in the New Orleans Bowl. And then almost, a few years later, the bottom fell out of it, right? Like Desmond Trotter and company went into Hattiesburg for South Alabama and beat Southern Miss handily, and the coach quit. And then Will Hall takes over. And then, that was Kane Womack's first game as well for South Alabama. And Will Hall took that loss very personally, close to being embarrassed about it. That's what he said. It feels like he has even keeled himself out over the last few years. How do you think Will Hall has fit? Because I think he's a good fit for Southern Miss.
I think he's a perfect guy for the job at Southern Miss. He has had to overcome some things. It's been kind of crazy a few years before he got here, as you were talking about. But I think he's the perfect guy to be at Southern Miss. He fits in. He's a Southern Miss type guy. I think he's recruiting the types of guys now that Southern Miss has always had success recruiting, and success in guys that could help, win ball games for him. So I'm excited for this year. I think he's got a chance. He's really got a really good roster. They've got some, as we talked about there, with Tate Rodemaker at quarterback, Ethan Crawford at quarterback, some good running backs, good wide receivers. They've added some guys there in the offensive line. Defensively, Southern Miss has always had a great tradition of the nasty bunch defense. So I feel real good about this season. I'm anxious for it to get started here in a week or 10 days, something like that. And I think we're going to see really good things out of the Golden Eagles this year.
Now, you mentioned a Southern Miss kind of guy, and I find it interesting. Southern Miss, is in a state with two SEC teams, right? The Cajuns have a chip on their shoulder because LSU. South Alabama will, change the schedule based on when the Iron Bowl is. And yet Southern Miss seems to have their own little fan base, right? Passionate. They don't really care about Ole Miss. They don't really care about Mississippi State. There's no chip on their shoulder. It's like, we like Southern Miss. That's our team. The other guys are fine, but we are Southern Miss fans. How has that come about over the generations? Because to me, that seems kind of clear.
Well, I just think it goes back to the tradition of Southern Miss. You go back, Southern Miss won a small college national championship in 1958. They won another one in 1962. A lot of those guys that played on those teams stuck around and have been a big part of the support system of Southern Miss. The Bobby Collins era kind of stands for itself, what he was able to accomplish at Southern Miss. And, he was then Bobby Collins followed by eventually Jeff Bauer, Southern Miss guy who, knew how to do it at Southern Miss, and Curly Hallman's another guy in there, Jim Carmody, another guy that was in there. So I just think it's been a Southern Miss has got the formula. It's to go find those guys, draw a circle about 100 miles around Hattiesburg, go find the best player that you can. And they've done that. And when you look back at some of the best players in the history of Southern Miss, it's guys who are inside that circle that you draw around Hattiesburg. So I don't think there's any secret. You just go out and try to find the best players you can. You find players that fit in to what you're trying to do. And I think for the most part, we've done a great job of that here at Southern Miss over the years.
All right. So then what are your expectations for this 2024 team? Because it is, I'm a big believer, John, in the same coach, same quarterback. All right. So you do have a little bit of a issue at Texas State, but it's the same coach and new quarterback, although that quarterback is the defending Sun Belt player of the year in Jordan McLeod. You do have Joey Aguilar with App State and Sean Clark, same coach, same quarterback. Here again, it's going to be same coach, but new quarterback completely to the system. What are your expectations heading into this 2024 season?
To be honest, I don't know that I have a lot of expectations, except I think it's going to be a really good Southern Miss team this year. I think it's going to be a much improved ball club because I think they've done a good job in all aspects of it, whether it be the kicking game, offense or defense. I think they brought in some good players, some good young players. They've had some good young players on the roster who have matured a little bit and gotten better. They've gone into the transfer portal. I think have got some guys who are going to help the ball club. I think our fans are excited about it. I think our atmosphere at the Rock is as good as anybody in the country, particularly in the Sun Belt Conference. And so I'm just excited for it. I think Will's done a great job of kind of doing it the right way, kind of building it from the ground floor up a little bit. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. And I think it's going to be a good year for the Golden Eagles.
Let's talk about the Rock for a little bit. We're talking with John Cox, the voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, heading into his 47th year. I was able to come to a South Alabama game not too far away from Mobile, and it mixes the old and the new, right? Like the sidelines are both, the old classic stadium, and then on the far sideline, if you want to say that, or on the end zone, one end zone is new suites, and then the other end zone is the football offices. They are doing a good job of mixing the old and the new in the same stadium.
Well, you're talking about a stadium that was originally built in 1932, and the players, the basic concept of it was built back in 1932, and one of the reasons it's called the Rock is those players back in the day when they started building that were guys that were hauling concrete up into that stadium. And so the players back in those 30s said it was like being at Alcatraz, the Rock. And so that's one of the reasons that it's got its name. But, it's so great, a location right there in the middle of campus. And we've done a really good job over the last few years of adding the suites that you mentioned, a new athletic center, a lot of off-season work in the Rock this year to kind of improve things and make it even better. But I just like the fact that it's there's not a bad seat in the house. You can be sitting anywhere in that place, and you feel like you're right on top of the action. And so our fans are one of the best things we have going for us. We have great fan support in whatever sport it is here at Southern Miss, particularly football. They love football, and I think our season tickets are going good. So I'm looking forward to great crowds at the Rock this year. I think we're going to have a lot of good things to cheer about as far as football is concerned. So I think it's going to be a good year.
I do want to ask you about the NIL because Will Hall has been all out in, embracing it on social media. We need your help. Have you spoken to fans and how they are trying to do their best to help out the NIL program over there at Southern Miss?
I really haven't. I kind of leave that to the guys that do that type of thing. But best that I could tell, talking to Will and talking to folks that they've had some great success in that. What the numbers are and those kinds of things, I don't know. But Will is really a great salesman for our Southern Miss program and the things that are going on at Southern Miss. And he seems to be excited about all that is going right now. And so hopefully it'll continue to help us grow our program here at Southern Miss.
Have you noticed any of the difference with the kids? Because, the one thing that always happened, whether I was, minor league baseball broadcaster, I got older, but the kids stayed the same age. That's the same thing with college football. People say the kids have changed. Have the kids changed at all? I just think these kids, want to play college football and enjoy college life.
Yeah, I really haven't. I mean, I think they're the same as they were when I first got into this so many years ago. I mean, they just want to play football, and I think they enjoy being here because of the way we do things here at Southern Miss. But no, I really haven't noticed a difference. I think the ones who help you win, the ones that are successful are young men who do it the same way as back in the day when Reggie Kyer was playing here and Brett Favre was playing here and Sammy Winder and all those great players that we had that went on to have great careers in professional football. So I'm around them a lot. I don't really notice a whole lot of change between the way the kids are now and the way they might have been 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
So you've had all these kids. You've been there for 47 years. Have you called games with anyone's grandkids that you saw originally?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I have some of the kids, some of the sons that have come back after their dads had been here, and maybe in some cases even some of the granddads and things like that. But no, but it's neat. I love to sit around and tell stories to our players. They don't believe a lot of the things I tell them about the way things used to be done and, the way we travel and all those kinds of things. So it's kind of neat to kind of impart a little history on our current players and kind of see what their reaction is.
So what would be some of those travel stories that they wouldn't believe?
Well, mostly, I mean, it's stuff like, where we stay now compared to where we may have stayed 20 or 30 years ago, as far as hotels, the way we the travel, in other sports like basketball, a lot of times back in the day, we'd load up in a couple of vans and take off on a 4 or 5 hour trip and go somewhere. And now it's a beautiful chartered bus with satellite TV and all those kinds of things. And, a long time ago when I got started, man, we were excited if we pulled into McDonald's and got a couple of cheeseburgers and an order of fries, for a meal. So just things like that. It's just like everything else in the world. It's kind of changed. It's kind of gotten a little better, and it's good for the athletes. So I like the way they now get a chance to sort of enjoy some of that.
Let's take one more time out. We'll wrap up our conversation with the voice of the Golden Eagles, John Cox. Been doing this 47 years. How much longer will he continue in this role for Southern Miss? We'll do that right after I tell you about Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. That makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of it. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app right before you buy, and we have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app or create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's wrap things up with the voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, John Cox, entering his 47th season. In week 2, he'll hit his 500th college football game. How much longer does the legend plan on calling Golden Eagles football? And so how much longer do you plan on doing this?
As long as I can do it. I have no clue. I'm doing what I always wanted to do. When I was about 6 years old, throwing a ball up against the wall in Middletown, Ohio, all I ever wanted to do was slap that headset on. I grew up, my dad was a big Cardinal fan. I grew up just outside of Cincinnati. I listened to the Cincinnati Reds on the radio. My dad was a Cardinal fan. We listened to Harry Carey and Jack Buck do the Cardinal games. My dad graduated from the University of Kentucky. I'd listen to Kaywood Ledford do all the Kentucky games. There was a guy in my hometown named Warren Johnson who did Middletown High School, did Miami of Ohio. He did everything. And I always thought if I could just be what Warren Johnson is one day on WPFB radio in Middletown, Ohio, that might be the greatest job you ever have. And so to think now that I'm sitting here closing in on 500 football broadcasts and been as long as I have here at Southern Miss, I have to kind of pinch myself sometime, doing what I always wanted to do. And I just can't ever think about not doing it one day.
So you mentioned you didn't get nervous on your first game. Do you still get excited when you're in there for the first time of the season, or do you get pumped up? I mean, I know I would, especially when it's a football game and you only get one a week compared to
Dave,
doing baseball.
whatever sport it is, I love it more now than I've ever had before. I love everything about it. I love the preparation. I love the travel. I love talking to our players and being around those 18 to 22-year-old guys and, telling them stories about what it was like back in, as they say, back in the olden days and those types of things. So I can honestly tell you that I love it more now than I've ever loved it before. The summer, don't like the summer very much. I like a few days when baseball is over, but then I'm ready for it to get going again. So I just love being around the players, being around the coaches, being around our fans, traveling, seeing the country and going to places that I've never been before. So a lot of fun. And I just, again, love it more than I ever have.
Yeah, and something that we don't get to see as much as you used to do, right? You don't get to see that scrawny 18-year-old as much become that man at 23 because of the portal now, but you still must get a couple, and that's got to be fun watching these kids grow up.
Oh yeah, that's a fun part. And a lot of them, I've stayed in touch with their parents, and I've known a lot of them now that show up at Southern Miss that I knew their dads or I knew their granddads or somebody like that. But so much fun to see young men come in here and some that don't know a lot about the history of Southern Miss, and we'll sit on a bus or sit in a hotel lobby and I'll tell them some of the stories of the great players at Southern Miss and the great wins and things like that. And they sit there kind of mesmerized sometimes, wondering maybe if they can do that one day. So, yeah, like I said, just a lot of fun. It's what I've wanted to do as long as I can remember since I was 6 years old. And I can't even picture not putting that headset on.
Well, it sounds like you got enough material for a book. Just saying.
Well, I've written a couple. I've written one on a couple of Golden Eagle football. I'm in the process of doing one on basketball. I haven't got real far along on that, but there's a lot of great stories. I said Southern Miss has got a great and rich tradition that goes back to when they got started back in 1912 playing football down the street at what is now Camper Park and Zoo, where they played the Hattiesburg Boy Scouts, I think, in the first ever football game way back in 1912. So a lot of great stories, a lot of great things happening at Southern Miss. Great place to be.
Well, we got these veteran broadcasters in the Sun Belt, yourself, Jay Walker, Barry McKnight, and Dave Cohen's been with Georgia State for over 40 years as well. What's it like when you guys get together? Like, you need just to record that conversation because I need to hear it.
No, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's what I find out sometimes is we have. I always like to ask them about how they got started and where they got started and what the equipment was like and things like that. And I find out, even though there's a lot of differences, there's a lot more in common between all of us than you would realize, of kind of the way we got started and how we got started and the way we kind of still try to do the games and things like that. So a lot of fun to be around those. And, one guy that I was really close to for a long time, Dave Nitz, who did Louisiana Tech for a long, long time. It's always fun to see those guys. It's always good to see the young guys who are kind of following in our footsteps. And, they ask a lot of questions sometimes about how do you do this and how do you do that? And I love to sit around and talk to those guys as well.
All right, let's wrap it up here with John Cox, the voice of Southern Miss. I think I'm going to be able to see Southern Miss in their season opener at Kentucky. What's it like when, Southern Miss is going up against, a team in the SEC? How excited do you get for that? And, what are your expectations for that game? Because obviously that's going to be a tough one.
Well, one, I love going back to Lexington. My dad grew up in Kentucky. He graduated from the University of Kentucky. My sister graduated from the University of Kentucky and taught there for a long, long time. And I've got about, 40, 50 cousins that live in Lexington. So always a lot of fun. In fact, the first college football game I ever saw was at old Stall Field there on the campus of the University of Kentucky. And so I've been able to go back there a couple of times to do a couple of games in Commonwealth Stadium, but it's going to be a great ball game. Kentucky's got a great athletic tradition. We were lucky enough the last time we were up there a few years ago we fell behind early, somehow rallied back and came from behind to beat them up there. So it'll be a great night of football. I know Kentucky's good. They've gotten better and better over the years. The Golden Eagles, I think, are going to be better. But it's always fun to be in an atmosphere like that where the place is going to be packed. It's a great place to call a football game. It's been the way they designed it. It's a great place to sit there and do a ball game. So I'm anxious for it to get here. Can't get here soon enough.
Well, it will certainly be here very soon, like you said, just under 2 weeks. He's John Cox. He's the voice of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. His 500th football game coming up in week 2, and he's heading into his 47th season as the voice of the Golden Eagles. John, really appreciate your time. Honored that you came on Locked On Sunbelt, part of our Voices of the Sunbelt feature. Best of luck this season, and we'll try to catch up with you sometime during the year. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you asking me to do it. I love what you do. You do a great job and do a great job of bringing things to people. And so we appreciate what you're doing. Looking forward to see you being on again, and love to have you come to the Rock. Come be with us at Hattiesburg for a ball game or two.